Good evening. Father McGowan is off tonight, but he'll rejoin us next week. You may not realize it, but April 21st to 27th is National Volunteer Week, a time set aside to honor the millions of people across our nation who give freely of their time and energy in service to others, often with little or no reward other than the personal satisfaction that comes from helping your fellow man. Tonight we'll be meeting people who are locally involved in the spirit of volunteerism. Up first we have Sally Yurchuk, Pennsylvania State Program Director of the Federal Program for Volunteers, Action. Sally, welcome.
Thank you, Isabel.
I'd like you to explain what is Action and how it originated.
Well, it has a long history, like any other bureaucracy, I suppose. But for sake of the discussion tonight, why don't we just take a look at one of the programs, which is fairly representative of the history of Action. In 1960-61, President Kennedy, as you may remember, and others citizens would remember, had and expressed a great interest in volunteer service, for youth especially, and for people to serve their country overseas through the Peace Corps, and for a domestic volunteer program, which later was called VISTA. And there was also at the same time a great interest in the country for the aging population, which demographics that we now know show us to be one of the great social service needs that need to be addressed by everyone. And so there was a White House conference on aging in 1961, and out of that conference grew the notion that seniors had all experience, wealth of education to offer their country, and just because they were retired wasn't a way to look at them as being no longer needed by society. And there came out of that conference a dual value, that seniors had service and expertise to give to their communities, and also the quality of life for seniors themselves might benefit if an organization or volunteer programs were set up in a certain way to encourage the seniors to volunteer and for their own quality of life to increase. So from there, lots of things happened. Some demonstration programs began with senior volunteers, and in 1971, the RSVP, which you'll hear about later in your program specifically, started some demonstration programs, and the Action Agency was founded by Congress to then house and develop and monitor and do the training for senior volunteer programs.
And what are some of the different organizations that are under the Action umbrella?
Well, there are lots. I mean, almost any that you could name that have a nonprofit Secretary of State standing, or sometimes government agencies are Action sponsors. But how we're organized is that there, of course, is a federal agency in Washington. That is the agency that does the work with Congress around the appropriations every 2 years and reauthorization, which gives the legal status for Action to continue its programs. Then there's a field staff, and we're one of the few agencies left, I guess now, that has a real field staff left in place. Many others have been cut. And some of our friends tease us, it's the FBI, and Action still has a field staff. But we take the field staff very seriously because it allows those of us who are placed in the field to develop more volunteer programs and to assist with the training to encourage the volunteer programs to improve.
Now, who are your volunteers?
They're every age from actually 14 up. We have young volunteer programs called Young Volunteers in Action. Action has a brand new student service learning program that's just been announced in the Federal Registry, and people who are interested in exploring that in Pennsylvania should call our office. And then seniors. Seniors through our older American volunteer programs are age 60 and over, and we have volunteers who are 90 years of age in some of our programs around the country.
Now, we've heard a lot about how spending cuts, the tax cuts, have been eating into social programs. Has Action been affected by this?
Oh, yes. I believe everyone has been affected. Our cut has been less than other agency cuts, and we feel very fortunate if such a thing works in this situation. But, for example, this year, it's the 1986 appropriation that is the very first cut for the Graham-Rudman-Hollings Budget Reduction Act, which everyone's been reading about. Our cut for 1986, is about 2% in our senior volunteer programs. And that is manageable.
Now, Action is unique among volunteer programs in that it does have a dual purpose. Could you explain that to us?
Yes, I'm glad you asked me that, Isabel. It's one of the unique features of the Action programs, in that most of us have volunteered one way or another in our communities. And the way volunteer programs are usually developed is that there's some service that needs to be dealt with or figured out or served in a community. So that almost all the emphasis is on how do we get food to people who are hungry, how do we assist people with nursing care, and so on. And we still do that. We still have the service equation. That's half of it. What kind of service do the volunteers provide to the community? But the other half of the equation is, what is the quality of life of this volunteer? And so, what we pay a lot of attention to, and what we're very serious about, is how is this volunteer treated? Is this volunteer is welcomed where they're giving service? Is this volunteer service recognized? So we get very excited about recognitions, luncheons and plaques and memos from action staff and from governors and mayors and from sponsoring agencies saying thank you. Just a letter, just a plaque. Very often there are pictures and papers and lots of recognition activities that have all kinds of different values to them, like having a spring picnic in the park as a part of a recognition. And trips, sometimes there'll be money raised outside of the project itself as a recognition to say thank you for your year of service. So we pay attention to the quality of the life of the volunteer.
And I imagine that this also aids in recruiting new volunteers. How are your volunteers recruited?
Yes. That's something that comes up with every training conference that we have. How do we best recruit volunteers? How do you do that? I mean, it's one thing to put an ad in the paper and say, we need volunteers to help this cancer drive to provide cancer pads for cancer patients or something like that. Or we need people to help do a litter cleanup campaign in an area that has suffered from a flood or whatever. It's another thing to match the skills and the interests of the volunteers to the different services. So almost all of our projects have a variety of volunteer opportunities. And when a volunteer calls or is referred or somebody says, oh, come on with me, I'm going down to the Catholic Social Agency today, why don't you come and see what kind of volunteer opportunities are there? It happens all kinds of ways, Isabel, but at some point the volunteer, it gets in touch with the project staff. And that's the staff that we fund, that Action funds, to do the actual volunteer work itself. And at that point, an interview takes place. It says, what are your interests? What are your background? What do you really best like to do? And somehow then a match is made between the volunteers' interests, their experience, and what they might like to do. And by the way, volunteers are encouraged to vary their volunteer experiences. You don't just get stuck into one job. If you'd like to change, that's the job of the project staff to help you look at a different volunteer opportunity.
Sally, thank you for volunteering to come and be with us this evening.
You're welcome.
Please stay with us. Up next, we'll have the directors of 2 local agencies that rely heavily on volunteers, so don't go away.
The House of Charity can be found at work throughout South Jersey, wherever there is suffering and distress. Through its agencies, compassionate care goes to the elderly. The needy receive food and clothing. Special education programs administered to the mentally handicapped. Expectant mothers receive pre- and postnatal care, and medical services are rendered to the ill. Support the House of Charity in South Jersey. Touch someone's life with love.
At the Donahue Funeral Home, we're always gratified to hear from the families we serve. Over the years, many bereaved families have told us how much they appreciated the warm, home-like atmosphere of the Donahue Funeral Home. To make such moments perhaps a little less difficult, the Donahue Funeral Home suggests that you discuss with us now, in the privacy of your home, pre-arrangement and the financial advantages and peace of mind it brings. That's what living is all about.
Welcome back. The topic, In Praise of Volunteers. And our guests for this second segment are Father Joseph DeMauro, Director of the Family Life Bureau of the Diocese of Camden, and from the Catholic Social Services Division of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, Marion Corbin, Director of Retired Seniors Volunteer Program, otherwise known as RSVP. Welcome to both of you.
Welcome.
And I'd like to ask you if you could briefly describe your programs. Father?
Yes, we deal with programs of education, enrichment, and healing for a variety of different people. Married couples, divorced persons, single people, engaged couples. And all of our programs are done with volunteers.
And Marion, could you describe your program for us, please?
Our program, RSVP, is geared toward the retired person, 60 years old and over. And what the RSVP program does is to place these retirees into positions throughout nonprofit agencies.
And could you give us an estimate of how many volunteers you have in your program?
In Philadelphia County, west of Broad Street, the RSVP program has 550 volunteers currently working in 52 agencies throughout that area.
And Father?
Well, that's difficult. We have 287 what we call episcopally appointed volunteers, volunteers that have a particular role description from our bishop and are assigned for a given time period. But we would probably have over 300 volunteers all told.
Why do people want to volunteer?
Our volunteers are retired, so they have worked a lifetime and they have experiences. So they're either isolated in their home, socially isolated, or else they are looking for something else to do. And what we try to do is to place them into job positions that are they're most comfortable with and of interest to them.
Now, Father, I would imagine that in your organization there's a different motivation with the volunteer.
Well, there's many motivations. We deal with what we call like-to-like ministry. So we have married couples helping married couples, divorced people helping divorced people, widows helping widows. And so the motivation is going to vary. We like to believe that the volunteers that we have, not only in the good work that they do, which we call ministry, also receive a lot of fulfillment in their own personal lives and in the relationships that they have.
Now, in this day and age when you have so many people who are involved in the workforce, the two-job families, do you find that the face of volunteerism is changing?
We haven't seen a dramatic change. When you have to volunteer your time, no matter what it is, it's always going to be difficult. However, the motivation's there. You're going to find the time. I guess we're all like that. If it's something important to us, we'll find the time. As far as the women that are in the workforce today, I think that a lot of women are volunteering more than ever. They're budgeting their time, but they're being more selective.
Now, Marion, I would imagine it is different with you because you have people who are looking for something to fill their time. Could you give me a description of perhaps your typical volunteer, if there is such a thing?
Well, I would consider a typical volunteer most of our volunteers come to us through the ages of 70 and 85. The ones 60 years old consider themselves too young to become involved in the RSVP program. But most of them are in schools if they're interested in children, nursing homes, hospitals. Nazareth Hospital has 100 of our volunteers now. We have them in the legal program. We have a volunteer who is a retired lawyer who trains our senior citizens to go back into the community to help other senior citizens. So we do cover a variety of outlets for the volunteers to get involved in. In fact, in Catholic Social Services, we have them working in the library there and the migration department also. So they work with the Vietnamese and help with them also.
Now, I think there's a tendency for people to think, oh, a Catholic volunteer program, well, they just help Catholics. What effect would these programs have on the community in general?
Well, none of our programs are strictly for Catholics. They're open to the community. In the area where we have them, Bill, our divorce programs, we don't envision any of our programs strictly Catholic. They're certainly done with a Catholic philosophy and mindset and under Catholic auspices, the Diocese of Camden, but they're open to all people.
And do you feel that having your volunteers in the community really does make a difference?
I think so.
Certainly.
Very much so.
I should add, Bill, also that my program is under the auspices of Action, which is a federal agency. Therefore, Catholic Social Services sponsor us, although we do get our funding, part of our funding from Action. Therefore, we are non-sectarian. We cut across all religious and ethnic backgrounds for our volunteers.
And what are some of the responses that you have gotten from the volunteers themselves, especially the senior citizens, in getting back out and meeting with people and feeling that they are having an effect upon their community?
Well, our volunteers feel, the majority of them, feel that it is a preventive medicine for them because they're older. And I have had letters written and volunteers coming to us to say, don't give us a recognition, we want to thank you for allowing us this opportunity to volunteer. So in a way, it is helping them to become more socially involved in the community and also to become a part of the community and to contribute their time.
Now, do you ever have situations where people find that the volunteer work is just too much for them? Do you ever lose volunteers?
One of our main concerns, Bill, is that when we ask our volunteers for help, we have almost like a contract. And so that before they accept to be a volunteer, they know what we're expecting and what we're able to do to support them. So that it's for a time period. It's for a time period.
And Father, when you were setting up, or rather when the diocese was setting up the Family Life Bureau, there was a system that was envisioned, which was the response listening, and then leadership. Are they the 3 points that?
Well, that's the process of family ministry that we're dealing with. Yes, before we begin a program or an activity, a ministry, we like to be aware of the needs and the concerns of the people we're trying to serve. And so the process is listening and responding to the extent that we can, but many times we don't do the responding. We enable people to help themselves and thereby help other people.
Would you suggest that sort of system for volunteer programs in general, in being able to see what people's needs are and then send out people who can meet those needs? Yes,
it certainly does work for us in part. But again, there's depending on the ministry area, the people that we're trying to serve, there are a variety of different ways. For example, a married couple, newly married couple, which is a beautiful thing to see, a newly married couple, maybe a year, 2 years married, preparing to help other newly married couples. In doing that, many of the topics that they have to discuss, if perhaps they're going to give a presentation or a lecture, they probably would have never discussed, at least at length, preparing for this. So the rewards for them as a married couple are very beneficial, as well as the rewards for the people that they're going to give their time and training to.
Well, we've seen a great deal of rewards ourselves tonight, just in hearing about the good work that is being done by volunteers. Stay with us, because coming up next, we'll meet with 2 volunteers who will share their experiences in working with members of their community. So don't go away.
I was single and pregnant. I wasn't sure who the father was. Everyone seemed worried about quick solutions, but didn't care about me or my child. Then I heard about MAS. They're different. They didn't judge me. They listened. They're professionals, they're free, and they're nearby. If you're single and pregnant, get help. Call MAS.
MAS, serving Burlington, Ocean, and Mercer counties. 609-394-5181.
What can I tell you? Every Sunday you can become more aware of the world around you.
You'll discover what's new in the Catholic Church.
There's always something new. And Sister Marianne and I would like to share with you the triumph of Catholics in the area. The spirit of Vatican II is alive in you and in me.
Well, look at the Gospels. God's Word has always had the answers for your life's problems.
I'm Father Lee Forbes.
And I'm Sister Marianne Johnston.
Every Sunday on the radio, join us.
Up on Air.
Welcome back. So far this evening, we've heard a lot about the good work that volunteers do. Now we're going to hear from some volunteers themselves. First, we have Mickey Stafford from the Family Life Bureau of the Camden Diocese. Mickey is involved with the Ministry to Separated and Divorced Catholics. And from the Retired Senior Citizens Program of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, we have Eve Ginsberg, who works with the Immigration Service. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Eve, I'd like to ask you, how did you get involved with RSVP?
A short time after I adjusted to my rather recent widowhood, I decided that I could then go back to doing what I had done for so many years, some volunteer work. And I learned that RSVP would take care of it. And so I called, and they outlined many of the interesting things that I might do, and I chose this particular one, Immigration Refugees, and it's been a delight.
And Mickey, what were the circumstances under which you got involved with volunteer work?
Well, something like Eve, I think I've done volunteer work all my life in one way or another. But this particular ministry and this particular volunteerism for me started when I was separated from my husband in a marriage that I had shared for 19 years. And what I was feeling at that time was just so devastating that I felt that I needed to reach out and find out if anyone else knew what I was feeling. And when I was in touch with the Family Life Bureau at the Camden Diocese, I found out there weren't very many programs for people like myself. So I offered my services to start some.
Now, was it difficult for either one of you to make that decision, to make that phone call and get involved?
I was ready for it. No, it wasn't difficult. I didn't try to do it before I knew I could. I was well adjusted by that time.
Now, Eve, it seemed to you that, or seems that in your case, the decision came after a healing period.
That's right.
Whereas with you, Vicki...
Almost during the healing period.
And well, your decision, Vicki, was actually part of the healing process.
Yes, in fact, it was very difficult for me to make that call. But I was feeling very much alone. And I'll be very truthful with you. I did a lot of praying. And I believe that helped me. And when I picked up that phone, the interesting thing was that I said, you know, here I am, this person is divorced, and I want to do something. And there was a nun on the other end of the line that said, oh my goodness, she says, I'm looking for someone. Mm-hmm. Do you write? And I said, yes, I do freelance, by the way. And she says, well, good, we need a newsletter. Come on in. And we, you know, just the warmth of her voice and the fact that she needed me was very, very important to me at that time.
And how important was that aspect to you, Eve, of being needed?
Well, that's always good and always necessary. And I must say that that entire department under Marion is warm, and they took me in beautifully. They make me feel very important, and it's most comfortable.
What are some of your duties, Eve?
Well, I try to fit in wherever I can. I can go from errand girl up to being receptionist and helping in any way that I can. I chose not to get too involved because I am a senior citizen, and I thought if for any reason I had to stay away for any time, there was one short time that I had to stay away, that I didn't want to keep them from having all the work done that I would take. So I keep it as light as I can, but it's good work and necessary work.
Now, your job, as I understand it, Mickey, has evolved from that beginning with the newsletter to where it is today.
Yes, we've several support group systems in the diocese, all the way from the seashore up here near Philadelphia, and I have gone out and I've lectured to groups of people, and all separated and divorced, and I've just touched so many lives. It's so fulfilling for myself. In fact, every time I think that I'm going out to help someone else, I always come home with more. I know I've gained much more than I've ever given. And that now has led me to a career change, which, you know, is so exciting for me. As I said, I've been teaching, but I knew that I didn't want to do that all my life. However, dealing with those children and finding so many of them so disturbed, their education interrupted by emotional problems, that between my volunteerism and my work with these children, I've decided to become a family counselor, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm going to school, and I'll be doing that very soon.
Now, how important do you think the like-to-like ministry, as Father DeMauro described it to us, is, especially in a program dealing with separated and divorced people?
Okay, I think it's imperative. I think it is, for me, in my opinion, the only way to begin, because people need to be in touch with other people when they're hurting. We don't always feel that way, but it's so important. When someone reaches out to us, it teaches us to reach out again from within our own hurt. And I can't help but refer to Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, they've been doing it for years, and it's so successful. And I believe that in many areas, we're taking that example that they've given us, and we're using that like-to-like ministry. And I have just found it to be extremely successful.
Well, I would think especially with the separated and divorced ministry, because so often when you are in that situation, you feel as if you are an outcast among your friends. Often in your church, you might feel that way.
Particularly in the church. I know that I felt the pariah. And I had been so involved with the church all my life that I insisted that there had to be a place for me at that time. And of course I found that there was. It was somewhat, the parameters were somewhat shaky, but we just made them a little stronger.
Now, Eve, you have had the situation where you have had a cultural exchange.
That's right.
You are not Catholic.
That's right, I'm Jewish, and I believe I'm the only Jewish person there at the diocese. But it's been so interesting. All my life I'd worked with Jewish organizations, and now while I'm working over there, I've gotten to know the people there, and they've gotten to know me. We talk at lunch, we exchange ideas about holidays that I have, holidays that they have. And then the people coming in from all the Mideast countries, from Poland, from Haiti, from everywhere, from Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and I greet them, and I've gotten to learn a great deal from them about their culture. So that's been great.
So you're living proof that you're never too old to learn something new.
That's right. That's right.
Ladies, what would you say to the person who might be watching out there who's trying to make the decision to pick up the phone, to call an organization, to get involved?
Do it. Try it. And if it works, fine. If the first doesn't work, try another. I didn't know whether this was going to be my cup of tea, but it's worked out beautifully.
You know, another suggestion too, I'm sure that there's something everybody has always wanted to do. And I feel that if we can find an area that deals with that something we've always wanted to do, it's a great place to begin. And as I said, now I'm changing a career with that whole idea.
That's right.
Well, volunteering is something you've always wanted to do. Here are some phone numbers for you now. To contact the Pennsylvania State Action Office, call 215-597-3543. To get in touch with the RSVP office, contact Catholic Social Services at 215-587-3583. And if you'd like to get in touch with the Family Life Bureau, in New Jersey, call 609-541-2100, and in Pennsylvania, 215-923-6137. If you would like a transcript of this evening's program, please write to Reel to Reel, 222 North 17th Street, Room 907, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 19103. That's Reel to Reel, 222 North 17th Street, Room 907, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 19103. Or call during business hours, area code 215-668-9842. That's 215-668-9842. I'd like to thank all of our studio guests this evening, especially Mickey and Eve.
You're welcome.
And join us again next week when we'll have another studio discussion, this time dealing with sexual addictions. Our guests will be regulars, Dr. Richard Fitzgibbons and Mary Jane Brandt. So see you next week.
Travel arrangements for Reel to Reel by Atkinson and Mullen Travel of Media, PA. Phone area 215-565-7070.
I don't know how I got into the Young Adult Prayer Group, but it sure is one of God's greatest gifts to me.
Over 150 gather in praise, song, and sharing. The 2 hours go by so quickly. At the end of the evening, a tremendous peace settles, and we know that Jesus will be with us in the weeks ahead.
The group meets this Saturday, April 26th at 7 p.m. at the Mercy Sisters Mother House in Marion. If you need directions, call 215-668-HOPE. See you there.